Today, we're diving into the craziest moments in land speed racing history, where fearless drivers pushed machines beyond their limits and stared death straight in the face. Land speed racing has pushed human beings to the absolute edge for over a century. We're talking about regular people climbing into machines that produce more horsepower than 100 sports cars combined, racing across deserts and beaches at speeds that would make a commercial airliner jealous. Some of these drivers became legends. Others paid the ultimate price. And right now, there's a British fighter pilot preparing to hit 1,000 miles per hour on four wheels. But to understand where we're going, we need to look back at where this insanity started. Because the history of land speed racing is filled with explosions, near-death experiences, and moments that still seem impossible even today. Here's the thing about land speed racing that most people don't get. This isn't just about going fast. Anyone with enough money can build a powerful engine. The real challenge is surviving the attempt. When you're pushing a vehicle beyond what physics says it should handle, everything becomes a potential disaster. Your tires can explode at 300 miles per hour. Your steering can fail. Your vision can blur so badly you can't see the track. And if something goes wrong, there's no hitting the brakes and pulling over. At these speeds, you're traveling the length of a football field every second. One wrong move, and you're gone. So what drives someone to risk everything for a speed record? Andy Green, the current world record holder and the only person to ever break the sound barrier on land, has an answer. He says it's about bringing engineering to life for the next generation. It's about proving what's possible. But if we're being honest, there's something else going on here. There's a fire inside these drivers that can't be explained by logic. They see a number, a barrier that everyone says can't be broken, and they have to break it, even if it might kill them. Let me take you through the most incredible moments in land speed racing history, starting over 100 years ago when cars were barely faster than horses.
Tommy Milton. Picture this. It's April 27th, 1920, in Daytona Beach, Florida. Most Americans are still using horses to get around town. The car is this new, strange invention that people aren't quite sure about yet. Then, Tommy Milton shows up with a Duesenberg powered by not one, but two 8-cylinder engines. 16 cylinders total. The crowd gathers on the hard-packed sand to watch him attempt something that sounds like suicide, braking 150 miles per hour. Milton climbs in. He's already blind in one eye, which makes this even crazier. He hits the gas and tears down the beach. The crowd watches in shock as this mechanical beast screams past them. Then, right near the end of his run, flames start shooting out from under the hood. The gas tank is about to explode. Milton has maybe seconds to make a decision, and here's what he does. He steers the burning car straight into the ocean. The waves put out the fire. He survives. And he sets a record of 156.046 miles per hour. The Los Angeles Times ran the headline, "Milton drives at awful rate." That's how foreign this speed was, the people. Awful, terrifying, unnatural. His record stood for 6 years, and a year later, he won the Indianapolis 500. But that ocean save, that set the tone for everything that would come after. Land speed racing wasn't just about speed. It was about keeping your cool when everything goes wrong. Henry Seagrave. 7 years later, a British driver named Henry Seagrave showed up at Daytona with something that looked more like an airplane than a car. They called it Mystery, and for good reason. This thing had two massive aircraft engines with a combined displacement equivalent to 12 Ford Mustangs. Think about that. 12 Mustangs worth of engine crammed into one vehicle. It produced 1,000 horsepower, which in 1927 was absolutely insane. Seagrave became the first man to break 200 miles per hour on land. But his story doesn't have a happy ending, and it shows you the cost of this obsession. 3 years later, in 1930, Seagrave was attempting to set a record on water. He crashed at over 200 miles per hour. When rescuers reached him, he was barely alive. His last words, "Have I broken the record?" He had. The Irish Times wrote in his obituary that swift death in a moment of triumph was probably the end he would have wanted. That's the mindset of these drivers. The record matters more than the life. Sir Malcolm Campbell. Now we jump ahead to September 3rd, 1935, and we're not on a beach anymore. We're on the Bonneville Salt Flats in Utah, this massive stretch of white desert that's flat as a table for miles. This is where the really fast runs would happen from now on. And the man attempting to break 300 miles per hour was a British driver named Malcolm Campbell. They called him the Human Bullet. Campbell had been trying to crack 300 for years. He'd set records of 246 miles per hour in 1931, 253 miles per hour in 1932, 276 miles per hour earlier in 1935. Each time, 300 miles per hour stayed just out of reach. His car was called the Bluebird. More than 28 feet long, it looked like a giant insect with this outlandish tail sticking out the back. At sunrise, 1,000 spectators gathered in the Utah desert to watch. Campbell roared across the salt flats. The speed climbed 290, 295, 300. Then, right as he finished his run, a tire exploded at 300 miles per hour. The sound was like a rifle crack echoing across the desert. The car swerved violently. At that speed, one wrong move and he's dead. Campbell grabbed the steering wheel and made a split-second correction that somehow worked. The car straightened out. He survived. The rules at this point required 2 runs within an hour, and the final speed would be the average. Campbell made his second run without incident. Official speed, 301.129 miles per hour. When asked how he felt, Campbell said, "I'm a happy man. For years, I have dreamed of driving 300 miles per hour. Well, boys, I made it." Then he probably went somewhere quiet and realized how close he'd come to dying. John Cobb. 3 years later, another British driver was ready to push even further. John Cobb and his team of engineers built something called the Railton, and it was one of the strangest-looking vehicles in land speed racing history. The cockpit was in the nose, ahead of the front axle. The body looked like a flattened submarine. It had 2 aircraft engines producing 2,500 horsepower total, powering all 4 wheels. And get this, they mounted blocks of ice on the engines to keep them cool. That's the level of problem-solving happening here. On September 15th, 1938, Cobb climbed into the Railton at Bonneville. He hit the throttle, and the car shot forward like a comet across the salt flats. He sat up front, shifting a 3-speed transmission and gripping the steering wheel while everything around him became a blur. When he climbed out after setting a new record of 350.194 miles per hour, reporters asked him what it felt like. His answer is chilling. The car just went faster and faster until it seemed it couldn't stand any more speed. My vision was blurred. I could hardly see anything at all. He couldn't see, but he kept going. That's land speed racing. And just like Seagrave, Cobb's story ends tragically too. Years later, he was killed attempting to break a speedboating record when he crashed at over 200 miles per hour. These drivers couldn't stop. The speed was in their blood.
Craig Breedlove. Now we jump forward 25 years and everything changes. A 26-year-old American hot rodder from Los Angeles named Craig Breedlove is about to bring land speed racing into the jet age. And this is where things get really wild. Breedlove was making $96 a week as a fireman, not exactly rich, but somehow he convinced Shell Oil to fund the building of a nearly 40-foot-long vehicle called Spirit of America. And here's the key difference. This car didn't have a traditional engine with pistons and valves. It had a jet engine. The same engine used in the Air Force's B-45 bomber. This thing accelerated so fast, it needed a parachute just to slow down. On August 5, 1963, at Bonneville, Breedlove climbed into the Spirit of America and cracked 400 miles per hour for the first time in history. His official speed? 407.447 miles per hour. A camera plane followed him from above, capturing the whole thing. The Beach Boys later wrote a hit song about it called Spirit of America. Breedlove became a celebrity overnight. But here's what's important. He told reporters he hadn't even used all the car's power. He could go faster. And that's when the real golden age began.
Art Arfons.
Because now, Breedlove had competition. A guy from Akron, Ohio named Art Arfons built his own jet-powered car in his backyard. He called it the Green Monster, and according to a Washington Post story, it was made mostly from junk, used parts, and government surplus. This was the American spirit in action, a regular guy building a land speed record car in his backyard. On August 27, 1964, at Bonneville, Arfons took the Green Monster to Bonneville and absolutely destroyed Breedlove's record. He hit 536.710 miles per hour. To put that in perspective, that's faster than most commercial airplanes cruise. But here's the crazy part. Arfons's record was the 5th time in October alone that the land speed record had fallen. These guys were going back and forth, constantly one-upping each other. Breedlove would set a record, Arfons would break it a week later, then Breedlove would break it again. It was the greatest rivalry land speed racing had ever seen. After setting his record, Arfons told reporters his car could go faster than sound, but right now he was hungry because he hadn't eaten since 5 in the morning and he was going to get a big cheeseburger. That's the attitude. Break a world record, then go get a cheeseburger. No big deal.
Craig Breedlove again. The rivalry between Breedlove and Arfons reached its peak in November 1965. Breedlove cracked 550 miles an hour on November 2nd with a speed of 555.485. 5 days later, Arfons topped him with 576.553 miles an hour. Back and forth, higher and higher, it seemed like nothing would stop them except death. On November 15th, Breedlove returned to Bonneville in his Goodyear-sponsored Spirit of America Sonic 1. This car looked like a rocket. The press called him the astronaut on wheels. And on that day, he did it. He broke 600 miles an hour. Official speed? 600.601 miles an hour. The New York Times wrote that 3 years earlier, nobody had heard of Breedlove. Now he had a custom tailor and was the Arnold Palmer of the Bonneville speed set. He was Mr. Hollywood. Life at 600 miles an hour was his dish. That would be Breedlove's last land speed record. He'd proven his point. He'd taken the record back from the British and pushed it further than anyone thought possible in such a short time. Richard Noble. After Breedlove's 1965 record, things went quiet for a while. Then, in 1983, a British driver named Richard Noble brought the record back to Britain. Noble had been inspired as a kid, reading about John Cobb, the man who'd cracked 350 miles an hour and later died trying to break a boat record. Noble started with a budget of just £175 and built a team and a car called Thrust 2. This car packed a Rolls-Royce fighter jet engine capable of 35,000 horsepower. When it moved across the desert, it went so fast the human eye couldn't focus on it. All you could see was a 30-foot-high dust trail. When Noble pulled his parachute to slow down, he experienced what he called a huge deceleration spike. The car slowed at roughly 130 miles per hour per second. He said it felt like driving straight down into the center of the earth. Noble's philosophy was interesting. He said the job of driving a car like this must have no emotion in it at all. If you're stimulated by emotion, you're not the man for the job. You're going to get into trouble. His record of 633.468 miles per hour would stand for 14 years.
Andy Green, 1997, 763 miles per hour, breaking the sound barrier. And then came October 15th, 1997, Black Rock Desert, Nevada. A British fighter pilot named Andy Green was about to do something no human had ever done: break the sound barrier on wheels. Green was driving the Thrust SSC, a car designed by Richard Noble's team. At world record speed, Green's flying mile went by in just under 4.7 seconds. A mile just went by. The car was completely manually controlled. Manual steering, manual throttle, manual brakes, manual parachute. No computers. Less things to fail. During the run, something went wrong. The car started drifting away from the safety line painted across the desert. Green was approaching the speed of sound, and his car was going off course. He had to fight it hard, muscling the steering wheel. The safety line was disappearing from his view. He lifted off the throttle for just a split second to tweak the aerodynamic balance, just enough to steer back in line. Then he put his foot down hard. What happens when a car hits the speed of sound? Journalists at the scene reported hearing the sonic boom echo across the desert. But here's the thing. The driver inside the car doesn't experience it. Green said, "On the plus side, where I was sitting, I had quite an interesting view." That British understatement. He just broke the sound barrier on wheels and calls it quite interesting. So where do we go from here? Andy Green isn't done. He's building a new car called the Bloodhound SSC. It's 44 feet long, weighs 7.5 tons, and is designed to hit 1,000 miles per hour. That's a flying mile in 3.6 seconds. The car will produce 135,000 horsepower from a combination of a Eurojet engine and 3 Norwegian-designed rockets. The wheels alone took 5 years to design and were tested at 1,100 miles per hour. Green tested the car for the first time in October 2017 at around 200 miles per hour. And his team is still working toward that 1,000 mile per hour goal. When asked how he can climb into a 135,000 horsepower vehicle and not be afraid, Green's answer echoes what Richard Noble said years earlier. There's no room for emotions. When he's in the car, he's making objective, clinical decisions at high speed. He needs to think about the next control steps, not whether he's scared or excited. That's what separates land speed racing drivers from the rest of us. They can turn off the fear. They can look at a machine that could kill them in an instant and see only the challenge. From Tommy Milton steering his burning car into the ocean in 1920 to Andy Green preparing to hit 1,000 miles per hour, these drivers share one thing: an obsession with pushing past what everyone else thinks is impossible. Some of them died chasing that dream. Henry Seagrave, John Cobb, and others paid the ultimate price. But their records live on, and each new generation of drivers builds on what came before. Every record that seemed impossible eventually fell. 150 miles per hour, 200 miles per hour, 300 miles per hour, 400 miles per hour, 600 miles per hour. The speed of sound. And soon, maybe 1,000 miles per hour. Land speed racing is about more than just going fast. It's about human ambition. It's about engineering pushed to the absolute limit. And it's about regular people doing extraordinary things that will be remembered long after they're gone. Official speed, 763.035 miles per hour. Supersonic. For the first time in history, a human traveled faster than sound on land. And Andy Green became a legend. If this got your engine running, hit subscribe so you don't miss when we cover the most dangerous races in motorsports history.